All those weeks ago, on beginning their ride to Tar Valon, had been dark grey or nothing. "I swear I will never wear grey again, Bella," she told her shaggy mount, patting the mare's neck. "Not that I'll have much choice once we're back in the White Tower," she thought. In the tower, all novices wore white. "Are you talking to yourself again?" Nynaeve asked, pulling her bay gelding closer. The two women were of a height as well as dressed alike, but the difference in their horses put the former wisdom of Emond's Field a head taller. Nynaeve frowned now, and tugged at the thick braid of dark hair hanging over her shoulder, the way she did when worried or troubled, or sometimes when she was preparing to be particularly stubborn even for her. A great serpent ring on her finger marked her as one of the accepted, not yet Aes Sedai, but a long step closer than Egwene. "Better you should be keeping watch." Egwene held her tongue on the retort that she had been watching for Tar Valon. Did she think I was standing in my stirrups because I do not like my saddle? Nynaeve seemed to forget too often that she was not the wisdom of Emond's Field any longer, and Egwene was no longer a child. But she wears the ring, and I do not, yet. And for her, that means nothing has changed. "Do you wonder how Moiraine is treating Lan?" she asked sweetly, and had a moment of pleasure at the sharp jerk Nynaeve gave her braid. The pleasure faded quickly, though. Wounding remarks did not come naturally to her, and she knew Nynaeve's emotions concerning the warder were like skeins of yarn after a kitten had gotten into the knitting basket. But Lan was no kitten, and Nynaeve would have to do something about the man before his stubborn, stupid nobility made her mad enough to kill him. They were 6 altogether, all plainly dressed enough not to stand out in the villages and small towns they had encountered, yet perhaps as odd a party as had crossed the Caroline grass any time recently. 4 of them women, and 1 of the men in a litter slung between 2 horses. The litter horses carried light packs as well, with supplies for the long stretches between villages the way they had come. 6 people, Egwene thought, and how many secrets? They all shared more than one, secrets that would have to be kept, perhaps, even in the White Tower. Life was simpler back home. "Nynaeve, do you think Rand is all right? And Perrin?" she added hastily. She could not afford to pretend any longer that one day she would marry Rand. Pretending would be all it was, now. She did not like that. She was not entirely reconciled to it, but she knew it. "Your dreams, have they been troubling you again?" Nynaeve sounded concerned, but Egwene was in no mood to accept sympathy. She made her voice sound as everyday as she could manage. "From the rumors we heard, I can't tell what might be going on. They have everything I know about so twisted, so wrong." "Everything has been wrong since Moiraine came into our lives," Nynaeve said brusquely. "Perrin and Rand. She hesitated, grimacing. Egwene thought Nynaeve believed everything that Rand had become was Moiraine's doing. They will have to take care of themselves for now. I'm afraid we have something to worry about ourselves. Something is not right. I can feel it." "Do you know what?" Egwene asked. "It feels almost like a storm." Nynaeve's dark eyes studied the morning sky, clear and blue, with only a few scattered white clouds, and she shook her head again. Like a storm coming. Nynaeve had always been able to foretell the weather. Listening to the wind, it was called, and the wisdom of every village was expected to do it, though many really could not. Yet since leaving Emond's Field, Nynaeve's ability had grown or changed. The storm, she felt, sometimes had to do with men rather than wind now. Egwene bit her underlip, thinking. They could not afford to be stopped or slowed, not after coming so far, not so close to Tar Valon. For Mat's sake, and for reasons that her mind might tell her were more important than the life of one village youth, one childhood friend, but that her heart could not rate so high. She looked at the others, wondering if any of them had noticed something. Aes Sedai, short and plump and all in shades of brown, rode apparently lost in thought, the hood of her cloak pulled forward till it all but hid her face, in the lead but letting her horse amble at its own pace. She was of the Black Ajah, and the Brown sisters usually cared more for seeking out knowledge than for anything in the world around them. Egwene was not so sure of Veren's detachment, though. Vereen had put herself hip-deep in the affairs of the world by being with them. Elaine, of an age with Egwene and also a novice, but golden-haired and blue-eyed where Egwene was dark, rode back beside the litter where Mat lay unconscious. In the same grey as Egwene and Nynaeve, she was watching him with the worry they all felt. Mat had not roused in 3 days now. The lean, long-haired man riding on the other side of the litter seemed to be trying to look everywhere without anyone noticing, and the lines of his face had deepened in concentration. "Rhuidean," Egwene said, and Nynaeve nodded. They slowed to let the litter catch up to them. Perrin ambled on ahead. "Do you sense something, Hurin?" Nynaeve asked. Elaine lifted her eyes, suddenly intent, from Mat's litter. With the 3 of them looking at him, the lean man shifted in his saddle and rubbed the side of his long nose. "Trouble?" he said, curt and reluctant at the same time. "I think maybe trouble." Years of experience seemed to have given him some talent at sniffing out wrongdoers, especially those who had done violence. Twice on the journey he had advised them to leave a village after being there less than an hour. The first time, they had all refused, saying they were too tired, but before the night was done, the innkeeper and 2 other men of the village had tried to murder them in their beds. They were only simple thieves, not dark friends, just greedy for the horses and whatever they had in their saddlebags and bundles. But the rest of the village knew of it and apparently considered strangers fair gleanings. They had been forced to flee a mob waving axe handles and pitchforks. The second time, Perrin ordered them to ride on as soon as Hurin spoke. But the thief-taker was always wary when talking to any of his companions. Except Mat, back when Mat could talk, the 2 of them had joked and played at dice when the women were not too close at hand. Egwene thought he might be uneasy at being alone, for all practical purposes, with an Aes Sedai and 3 women in training for sisterhood. Some men found facing a fight easier than facing Aes Sedai. "What kind of trouble?" Elaine said. She spoke easily, but with such a clear note of expecting to be answered immediately and in detail that Hurin opened his mouth. "I smell." He cut himself short and blinked as if surprised, eyes darting from one woman to another. "Just a feeling," he said finally. "Gay. A hunch. I've seen some tracks. Yesterday and today. A lot of horses. 20 or 30 going this way, 20 or 30 that. It makes me wonder. That's all? A feeling. But I say it's trouble." "Tracks?" Egwene had not noticed them, Nynaeve said sharply. "I did not see anything worrisome in them." Nynaeve prided herself on being as good a tracker as any man. They were days old. "What makes you think they are trouble?" "I just think they are," Hurin said slowly, as if he wanted to say more. He dropped his eyes, rubbing at his nose and inhaling deeply. "It's been a long time since we saw a village," he muttered. "Who knows what news from Falme has come before us? We might not find so good a welcome as we expect. I'm thinking these men could be brigands, killers. We should be wary, I'm thinking. If Mat was on his feet, I'd scout ahead, but maybe it's best I don't leave you alone." Nynaeve's eyebrows lifted. "Do you believe we cannot look after ourselves?" "The one power won't do you much good if somebody kills you before you can use it," Hurin said, addressing the tall pommel of his saddle. "Begging your pardon, but I think I'll just ride up with Aes Sedai for a time." He dug in his heels and galloped forward before any of them could speak again. "Now, that is a surprise," Elaine said as Hurin slowed a little distance from the brown sister. Perrin did not seem to notice him any more than she noticed anything else, and he appeared content to leave it so. He has been staying as far from Perrin as he could ever since we left Tom and Head. He always looks at her as if he's afraid of what she might say. "Respecting Aes Sedai doesn't mean he is not afraid of them," Nynaeve said, then added reluctantly, "of us. If he thinks there might be trouble, we ought to send him out scouting." Egwene took a deep breath and gave the other 2 women as level a look as she could manage. "If there is trouble, we can defend ourselves better than he could with 100 soldiers to help him." "He doesn't know that," Nynaeve said flatly, "and I am not about to tell him. Or anyone else." I can imagine what Perrin would have to say about it. Elaine sounded anxious. "I wish I had some idea how much she does know. Egwene, I don't know if my mother could help me if the Amelin found out, much less help the pair of you, or even whether she would try." Elaine's mother was Queen of Andor. She was only able to learn a little of the power before she left the White Tower, for all she has lived as if she had been raised to full sister. We cannot hope to rely on Morghese, Nynaeve said. She is in Kemlin, and we will be in Tar Valon. No, we may be in enough trouble already for going off as we did, no matter what we've brought back. It will be best if we stay low, behave humbly, and do nothing to attract more attention than we already have. Another time, Egwene would have laughed at the idea of Nynaeve pretending to be humble. Even Elaine managed a better job of it. But at present she did not feel like laughing. And if Rhuidean is right, and if we are attacked, he cannot defend us against 20 or 30 men, and we might be dead if we wait for Veron to do something. You said you sense a storm, Nynaeve. You do? Elaine said. Red gold curls swung as she shook her head. Verine will not like it if we... She trailed off. She trailed off. Whatever Verine likes or doesn't like, we may have to. I will do what must be done, Nynaeve said sharply. If there is anything to be done, and you two will run if need be. The White Tower may be all abuzz with your potential, but don't think they will not still you both if the Amelin seat or the Hall of the Tower decides it is necessary. Elaine swallowed hard. If they would still us for it, she said in a faint voice, they would still you, too. We should all run together, or act together. Rhuidean has been right before. If we want to live to be in trouble in the tower, we may have to do what we must. Egwene shivered, stilled, cut off from Sedai, the female half of the true source. Few Aes Sedai had ever incurred that penalty, yet there were deeds for which the tower demanded stilling. Novices were required to learn the names of every Aes Sedai who had ever been stilled, and their crimes. She could always feel the source there, now, just out of sight, like the sun at noon over her shoulder. If she often caught nothing when she tried to touch Sedai, she still wanted to touch it. The more she touched it, the more she wanted to, all the time, no matter what. Sheriam Sedai, the mistress of novices, said about the dangers of growing too fond of the feel of the one power, to be cut off from it, still able to sense Sedar, but never to touch it again. Neither of the others seemed to want to talk, either. To cover her shaking, she bent from her saddle to the gently swaying litter. Mat's blankets had become disarrayed, exposing a curved dagger in a golden sheath clutched in one hand, a ruby the size of a pigeon's egg capping the hilt. Careful not to touch the dagger, she eased the blankets back over his hand. He was only a few years older than she, but gaunt cheeks and sallow skin had aged him. His chest barely moved as he breathed hoarsely. A lumpy leather sack lay at his feet. She shifted the blanket to cover that, too. We have to get Mat to the tower, she thought, and the sack. Nynaeve leaned down as well, and felt Mat's forehead. His fever is worse, she sounded worried. If only I had some worry-knot root or fever-bane. Perhaps if Verine tried healing again, Elaine said. Nynaeve shook her head. She smoothed Mat's hair back and sighed, then straightened before speaking. She says it is all she can do to keep him alive now, and I believe her. I tried healing last night myself, but nothing happened, Elaine gasped. Sheriam Sedai says we mustn't try to heal until we've been guided step by step 100 times. You could have killed him, Egwene said sharply. Nynaeve sniffed loudly. I was healing before I ever thought of going to Tar Valon, even if I didn't know I was. But it seems I need my medicines to make it work for me. If I only had some fever-bane. I do not think he has much time left. Hours, maybe. Egwene thought she sounded almost as unhappy about knowing, about how she knew, as she did about Mat. She wondered again why Nynaeve had chosen to go to Tar Valon for training at all. She had learned to channel unknowingly, even if she could not always control the act, and had passed the crisis that killed 3 out of 4 women who learned without Aes Sedai guidance. Nynaeve said she wanted to learn more, but often she was as reluctant about it as a child being dosed with sheepstong root. We will have him in the White Tower soon, Egwene said. They can heal him there. The Amelin will take care of him. She will take care of everything. She did not look at where Mat's blanket covered the sack at his feet. The other 2 women were studiously not looking at it either. There were some secrets they would all be relieved to shed. Writers, Nynaeve said suddenly. But Egwene had already seen them. 24 men appearing over a low rise ahead, white cloaks flapping as they galloped, angling toward them. "Children of the light," Elaine said, "like a curse. I think we have found your storm and Hurin's trouble." Perrin had pulled up, a hand on Hurin's arm to stop him drawing his sword. Egwene touched the lead litter horse to stop it just behind the plump Aes Sedai. "Let me do all the talking, children," the Aes Sedai said placidly, pushing her cowl back to reveal grey in her hair. Egwene was not sure how old Perrin was. She thought old enough to be a grandmother, but the grey streaks were the Aes Sedai's only signs of age. And whatever you do, do not allow them to make you angry. Perrin's face was as calm as her voice, but Egwene thought she saw the Aes Sedai measuring the distance to Tar Valon. The tops of the towers were visible now, and a high bridge arching over the river to the island, tall enough for the trading ships that plied the river to sail beneath. Close enough to see, Egwene thought, but too far to do any good. For a moment she was sure the oncoming whitecloaks meant to charge them, but their leader raised a hand, and they abruptly drew rein a scant 40 paces off, scattering dust and dirt ahead of them. Nynaeve muttered angrily under her breath, and Elaine sat straight and full of pride, appearing likely to berate the whitecloaks for ill manners. Hurin still had a grip on his sword hilt. He looked ready to put himself between the women and the whitecloaks, no matter what Perrin said. Vereen mildly waved a hand in front of her face to dispel the dust. The white-cloaked riders spread out in an arc, blocking the way firmly. Their breastplates and conical helmets shone from polishing, and even the mail on their arms gleamed brightly. Each man had the flaring golden sun on his breast. Some fitted arrows to bows, which they did not raise, but held ready. Their leader was a young man, yet he wore 2 golden knots of rank beneath the sunburst on his cloak. 2 Tar Valon witches, unless I miss my guess, yes? He said with a tight smile that pinched his narrow face. Arrogance brightened his eyes, as if he knew some truth others were too stupid to see. And 2 nits, and a pair of lapdogs, one sick and one old. Hurin bristled, but Vereen's hand restrained him. "Where do you come from?" the white cloak demanded. "We come from the west," Perrin said placidly. "Move out of our way, and let us continue. The children of the light have no authority here. The children have authority wherever the light is, which, and where the light is not, we bring it. Answer my questions. Or must I take you to our camp and let the questioners ask?" Mat could not afford any more delay in reaching help in the White Tower. And more importantly, Egwene winced to think of it that way. More importantly, they could not let the contents of that sack fall into White Cloak hands. "I have answered you," Perrin said, still calm, "and more politely than you deserve. Do you really believe you can stop us?" Some of the white cloaks raised their bows as if she had uttered a threat, but she went on, her voice never rising. "In some lands you may hold sway by your threats, but not here, in sight of Tar Valon. Can you truly believe that in this place you will be allowed to carry off Aes Sedai?" Then he glanced back at his men, either to remind himself of their support or because he had remembered they were watching, and with that he took himself in hand. "I have no fear of your dark friend ways, witch. Witch, answer me, or answer the questioners." It did not sound as forceful as he had. Perrin opened her mouth as if for idle conversation, but before she could speak, Elaine jumped in, voice ringing with command. "I am Elaine, daughter, heir of Andor. If you do not move aside at once, you will have Queen Morghese to answer to. White Cloak!" Perrin hissed with vexation. The White Cloak looked taken aback for an instant, but then he laughed. "You think it so? Yes? Perhaps you will discover Morghese no longer has so much love for witches, girl. If I take you from them and return you to her side, she will thank me for it. Lord Captain Eamonvalder would like very much to speak to you, daughter, heir of Andor." He raised a hand, whether to gesture or signal his men, Egwene could not say. Some of the white cloaks gathered their reins. How? "There's no more time to wait," Egwene thought. "I will not be chained again." She opened herself to the one power. It was a simple exercise, and after long practice, it went much more swiftly than the first time she had tried. In a heartbeat, her mind emptied of everything, everything but a single rosebud floating in emptiness. She was the rosebud, opening to the light, opening to Sedar, the female half of the true source. The power flooded her, threatening to sweep her away. It was like being filled with the light, like being one with the light, a glorious ecstasy. She fought to keep from being overwhelmed, and focused on the ground in front of the White Cloak officer's horse. A small patch of ground. She did not want to kill anyone. "You will not take me." The man's hand was still going up. With a roar, the ground in front of him erupted in a narrow fountain of dirt and rocks higher than his head. Screaming, his horse reared, and he rolled out of his saddle like a sack. Before he hit the ground, Egwene shifted her focus closer to the other White Cloaks, and the ground threw up another small explosion. Bella danced sideways, but she controlled the mare with reins and knees without even thinking of it. Wrapped inside emptiness, she was still surprised at a third eruption, not of her making, and a fourth. Distantly, she was aware of Nynaeve and Elaine, both enveloped in the glow that said they, too, had embraced Sedar, had been embraced by it. That aura would not be visible to any but another woman who could channel. But the results were visible to all. Explosions harried the White Cloaks on every side, showering them with dirt, shaking them with noise, sending their horses plunging wildly. Hurin stared around him, mouth open and obviously as frightened as the White Cloaks, as he tried to keep the litter horses and his own mount from bolting. Perrin was wide-eyed with astonishment and anger. Her mouth worked furiously, but whatever she might be saying was lost in the thunder. And then the White Cloaks were running away, some dropping their bows in panic, galloping as if the Dark One himself were at their backs. All but the young officer who was picking himself up off the ground. Shoulders hunched, he stared at Perrin, the whites of his eyes showing all the way around. Dust stained his fine white cloak and his face, but he did not seem to notice. "Kill me then, witch," he said shakily. "Go ahead. Kill me, as you killed my father." The Aes Sedai ignored him. Her attention was all on her companions. As if they, too, had forgotten their officer, the fleeing White Cloaks vanished over the same rise where they had first appeared, all in a body and none looking back. The officer's horse ran with them. Under Perrin's furious gaze, Egwene let go of Sedar, slowly, unwillingly. It was always hard letting go. Even more slowly, the glow around Nynaeve vanished. Nynaeve was frowning hard at the pinch-faced White Cloak before them, as if he might still be capable of some sort of trickery. Elaine looked shocked by what she had done. "What you have done," Perrin began, then stopped to take a deep breath. Her stare took in all three of the younger women. "What you have done is an abomination." An abomination. An Aes Sedai does not use the power as a weapon, except against shadowspawn, or in the last extreme to defend her life. The 3 oaths. They were ready to kill us, Nynaeve broke in heatedly. Kill us, or carry us off to be tortured. He was giving the order. It was not really using the power as a weapon, Perrin Sedai. Elaine held her chin high, but her voice shook. "We did not hurt anyone, or even try to hurt anyone. Surely. Do not split hairs with me," Perrin snapped. "When you become full Aes Sedai, if you ever become full Aes Sedai, you will be bound to obey the 3 oaths, but even novices are expected to do their best to live as if already bound." "What about him?" Nynaeve gestured to the White Cloak officer, still standing there and looking stunned. Her face was as tight as a drum. She seemed almost as angry as the Aes Sedai. "He was about to take us prisoner. Mat will die if he doesn't reach the tower soon, and fun. Egwene knew what Nynaeve was struggling not to say aloud. "And we can't let that sack fall into any hands but the Amerlin's." Perrin regarded the White Cloak wearily. "He was only trying to bully us, child. He knew very well he could not make us go where we did not want, not without more trouble than he was willing to accept. Not here. Not in sight of Tar Valon. I could have talked us past him, with a little time and a little patience. Oh, He might well have tried to kill us if he could have done it from hiding, but no white cloak with the brains of a goat will try harming an Aes Sedai who knows he is there. See what you have done. What stories will those men tell, and what harm will it do? The officer's face had reddened when she mentioned hiding. It is no cowardice not to charge the powers that broke the world, he burst out. You witches want to break the world again, in the service of the Dark One. Perrin shook her head in tired disbelief. Egwene wished she could mend some of the damage she had done. I am very sorry for what I did, she told the officer. She was glad she was not bound to speak no word that was not true, as full Aes Sedai were, because what she had said was only half true at best. I should not have, and I apologize. I am sure Perrin Sedai will heal your bruises. He stepped back as if she had offered to have him skinned alive, and Perrin sniffed loudly. We have come a long way, Egwene went on, all the way from Tormented, and if I weren't so tired I would never have. Be quiet, girl, Perrin shouted at the same time. The white cloak snarled. Tormented? Fimek, you were at Falmer. He stumbled back another step and half drew his sword. From the look on his face, Egwene did not know whether he meant to attack or to defend himself. Hurin moved his horse closer to the white cloak, a hand on his sword-breaker, but the narrow-faced man went on in a rant, spittle flying with his fury. My father died at Falmer. Jar told me. You witches killed him for your false dragon. I'll see you dead for it. I will see you burn. Impetuous children, Rhuidean sighed. Almost as bad as boys for letting your mouths run away with you. Go with the light, my son, she told the white cloak. Without another word, she guided them around the man, but his shouts followed after. My name is Dane Bornhold. Remember it, dark friends. I will make you fear my name. Remember my name! As Bornhold's shouts faded behind them, they rode in silence for a time. Finally, Egwene said to no one in particular, I was only trying to make things better. Better, Perrin muttered. You must learn there is a time to speak all of the truth, and a time to govern your tongue. The least of the lessons you must learn, but important, if you mean to live long enough to wear the shawl of a full sister. Did it never occur to you that word of Falme might have come ahead of us? Why should it have occurred to her? Nynaeve asked. No one we've met before this had heard more than rumors, if that, and we have outrun even rumor in the last month. And all word has to come along the same roads we used, Perrin replied. We have moved slowly. Rumor takes wing along 100 paths. Always plan for the worst, child. That way all your surprises will be pleasant ones. What did he mean about my mother? Elaine said suddenly. He must have been lying. She would never turn against Tar Valon. The queens of Andor have always been friends to Tar Valon, but all things change. Perrin's face was calm again, yet there was a tightness in her voice. She turned in her saddle to look over them, the three young women, Rhuidean, Mat in the litter. The world is strange, and all things change. They capped the ridge. A village was in sight ahead of them now, yellow tile roofs clustered around the great bridge that led to Tar Valon. Now, you must truly be on your guard, Perrin told them. Now, the real danger begins. Chapter 11. Tar Valon. The small village of Darin had lain beside the river Erinine almost as long as Tar Valon had occupied its island. Darin's small red and brown brick houses and shops, its stone-paved streets, gave a feel of permanence. But the village had been burned in the Trolloc Wars, sacked when Artur Hawkwing's armies besieged Tar Valon, looted more than once during the War of the 100 Years, and put to the torch again in the Aiel War, not quite 20 years before. An unquiet history for a little village, but Darin's place, at the foot of one of the bridges leading out to Tar Valon, ensured it would always be rebuilt, however many times it was destroyed. So long as Tar Valon stood, at least. At first it seemed to Egwene that Darin was expecting war again. A square of pikemen marched along the streets, ranks and files bristling like a carding comb, followed by bowmen in flat, rimmed helmets with filled quivers riding at their hips and bows slanted across their chests. A squadron of armored horsemen, faces hidden behind the steel bars of their helmets, gave way to Perrin and her party at a wave of their officer's gauntleted hand. All wore the white flame of Tar Valon like a snowy teardrop on their breasts. Yet townspeople went about their business with apparent unconcern, the market throng dividing around the soldiers as if marching men were obstructions they were long used to. A few men and women carrying trays of fruit kept pace with the soldiers, trying to interest them in wrinkled apples and pears pulled from winter cellars, but aside from those few, shopkeepers and hawkers alike paid the soldiers no mind. Verheyn seemingly ignored them too, as she led Egwene and the others through the village to the great bridge, arching over 1/2 mile or more of water like lace woven from stone. At the foot of the bridge more soldiers stood guard, a dozen pikemen and half that many archers, checking everyone who wanted to cross. Their officer, a balding man with his helmet hanging on his sword hilt, looked harassed by the waiting line of people afoot and on horseback, people with carts drawn by oxen or horses or the owner. The line was only 100 paces long, but every time one was let onto the bridge, another joined the far end. Just the same, the balding man seemed to be taking his time about making sure each one had a right to enter Tar Valon before he let them go. He opened his mouth angrily when Verrin led her party to the head of the line, then caught a good look at her face and hurriedly stuffed his helmet onto his head. No one who really knew them needed a great serpent ring to identify Aes Sedai. "Good morrow to you, Aes Sedai," he said, bowing with a hand to his heart. "Good morrow. Go right across, if it please you." Verrin reined in beside him. A murmur rose from the waiting line, but no one voiced a complaint aloud. "Trouble from the White Cloaks, guardsman. Why are we stopping?" Egwene wondered urgently. "Has she forgotten about Mat?" "Not really, Aes Sedai," the officer said. "No fighting. They tried to move into Eldon Market, the other side of the river, but we showed them better. The Amelin means to make sure they don't try again." "Perrin Sedai," Egwene began carefully. "Mat!" "In a moment, child," the Aes Sedai said, sounding only halfway absent-minded. "I have not forgotten him." Her attention went right back to the officer. "And the outlying villages?" The man shrugged uncomfortably. "We can't keep the White Cloaks out, Aes Sedai, but they move off when our patrols ride in. They seem to be trying to goad us." Perrin nodded and would have ridden on, but the officer spoke again. "Pardon, Aes Sedai, but you've obviously come from a distance. Have you any news? Fresh rumors come upriver with every trading vessel. They say there's a new false dragon out west somewhere. Why, they even say he has Arthur Hawkwing's armies back from the dead following him, and that he killed a lot of White Cloaks and destroyed a city. Falme, they call it in Tarabon, some say. They say Aes Sedai helped him." A man's voice shouted from the waiting line. Hurin breathed deeply and shifted himself as if he expected violence. Egwene looked round, but there was no sign of whoever had shouted. Everyone appeared to be concerned only with waiting, patiently or impatiently, for his turn to cross. Things had changed, and not for the better. When she had left Tar Valon, any man who spoke against Aes Sedai would have been lucky to escape with a punch in the nose from whoever overheard. Red in the face, the officer was glaring down the line. "Rumors are seldom true," Verrin told him. "I can tell you that Falme still stands. It isn't even in Tarabon, guardsman. Listen less to rumor, and more to the Amelin seat. The light shine on you." She lifted her reins, and he bowed as she led the others past him. The bridge struck Egwene with wonder, as the bridges of Tar Valon always did. The open-work walls looked intricate enough to tax the best craftswoman at her lace frame. It hardly seemed that such could have been done with stone, or that it could stand even its own weight. The river rolled, strong and steady, 50 paces or more below, and for all that half-mile the bridge flowed unsupported from riverbank to island. Even more wondrous, in its own way, was the feeling that the bridge was taking her home. More wondrous and shocking. Emond's Field is my home, but it was in Tar Valon that she would learn what she must to keep her alive, to keep her free. It was in Tar Valon that she would learn, must learn, why her dreams disturbed her so, and why they sometimes seemed to have meanings she could not puzzle out. Tar Valon was where her life was tied now. If she ever returned to Emond's Field, the if hurt, but she had to be honest. If she returned, it would be to visit, to see her parents. She had already gone beyond being an innkeeper's daughter. Those bonds would not hold her again either, not because she hated them, but because she had outgrown them. The bridge was only the beginning. It arched straight to the walls that surrounded the island, high walls of gleaming white, silver-streaked stone, whose tops looked down on the bridge's height. At intervals, guard towers interrupted the walls, of the same white stone, their massive footings washed by the river. But above the walls and beyond rose the true towers of Tar Valon, the towers of story, pointed spires and flutes and spirals, some connected by airy bridges, a good 100 paces or more above the ground. And still only the beginning. There were no guards on the bronze-clad gates, and they stood wide enough for 20 abreast to ride through, opening onto one of the broad avenues that crisscrossed the island. Spring might barely have come, but the air already smelled of flowers and perfumes and spices. The city took Egwene's breath, as if she had never seen it before. Every square and street crossing had its fountain, or its monument or statue, some atop great columns as high as towers, but it was the city itself that dazzled the eye. What was plain in form might have so many ornaments and carvings that it seemed an ornament itself, or, lacking decoration, used its form alone for grandeur. Great buildings and small in stone of every color, looking like shells or waves or wind, sculpted cliffs flowing and fanciful, captured from nature or the flights of men's minds. The dwellings, the inns, the very stables, even the most insignificant buildings in Tar Valon had been made for beauty. Ogier stonemasons had built most of the city in the long years after the breaking of the world, and they maintained it had been their finest work. Men and women of every nation thronged the streets. They were dark of skin and pale and everything in between, their garments in bright colors and patterns, or drab but decked with fringes and braids and shining buttons, or stark and severe, showing more skin than Egwene thought proper, or revealing nothing but eyes and fingertips. Sedan chairs and litters wove through the crowds, the trotting bearers crying, "Give way!" Closed carriages inched along, liveried coachmen shouting, "Hiya!" and "Ho!" as if they believed they might achieve more than a walk. Street musicians played flute or harp or pipes, sometimes accompanying a juggler or an acrobat, always with a cap set out for coins. Wandering hawkers cried their wares, and shopkeepers standing in front of their shops shouted the excellence of their goods. A hum filled the city like the song of a thing alive. Verim had pulled her cowl back up, hiding her face. No one seemed to be paying them any mind in these crowds, Egwene thought. Not even Mat in his horse litter drew a second glance, though some folk did edge away from it as they hurried past. People sometimes brought their sick to the White Tower for healing, and whatever he had might be catching. Egwene rode up beside Verin and leaned close. "Do you really expect trouble now? We are in the city. We are almost there." The White Tower stood in plain sight now, the great building gleaming broad and tall above the rooftops. "I always expect trouble," Verin replied placidly, "and so should you. In the tower most of all. You must all of you be more careful than ever now. Your tricks." Her mouth tightened for an instant before serenity returned. "Frightened away the white cloaks, but inside the tower they may well bring you death or stilling." "I would not do that in the tower," Egwene protested. "None of us would." Nynaeve and Elaine had joined them, leaving Yurin to mind the litter horses. They nodded, Elaine fervently, and Nynaeve, it seemed to Egwene, as if she had reservations. "You should not do it ever again, child. You must not. Ever." Verin eyed them sideways round the edge of her cowl, and shook her head. "And I truly hope you have learned the folly of speaking when you should be silent." Elaine's face went crimson, and Egwene's cheeks grew hot. "Once we enter the tower grounds, hold your tongues and accept whatever happens. Whatever happens. You know nothing of what awaits us in the tower, and if you did, you would not know how to handle it, so be silent." "I will do as you say, Aes Sedai," Egwene said, and Elaine echoed her. Nynaeve sniffed. The Aes Sedai stared at her, and she nodded reluctantly. The street opened into a vast square, centered in the city, and in the middle of the square stood the White Tower, shining in the sun, rising until it seemed to touch the sky from a palace of domes and delicate spires and other shapes surrounded by the tower grounds. There were surprisingly few people in the square. No one intruded on the tower unless he had business there, Egwene reminded herself uneasily. Hurin led the horse litter forward as they entered the square. "Aes Sedai, I must leave you now." He eyed the tower once, then managed not to look at it again, though it was hard to look at anything else. Hurin came from a land where Aes Sedai were respected, but it was one thing to respect them, and quite another to be surrounded by them. "You have been a great help on our journey, Hurin," Perrin told him. "And a long journey it has been. There will be a place in the tower for you to rest before you travel on." Hurin shook his head emphatically. "I cannot waste a day, Perrin Sedai. Not another hour. I must return to Shi'enar to tell King Isar and Lord Egelmar the truth of what happened at Falme. I must tell them about—" He cut off abruptly and looked around. There was no one close enough to overhear, but he still lowered his voice and said only, "About Rand. That the dragon is reborn. There must be trading ships heading upriver, and I mean to be on the next to sail." "Go in the light then, Hurin of Shi'enar," Perrin said. "The light illumine all of you," he replied, gathering his reins. Yet he hesitated a moment, then added, "If you need me, ever send word to Faldara, and I'll find a way to come." Clearing his throat as if embarrassed, he turned his horse and trotted away, heading beyond the tower. All too soon he was lost to sight. Nynaeve gave an exasperated shake of her head. They always say to send for them if you need them, but when you do need one, you need him right then." "No man can help where we are going now," Perrin said dryly. "Remember, be silent." Egwene felt a sense of loss with Hurin's going. He would barely talk to any of them, except Mat. And Perrin was right. He was only a man, and helpless as a babe when it came to facing whatever might await them in the tower. Yet his leaving made their number one less, and she could never help thinking that a man with a sword was useful to have around. And he had been a link to Rand and Perrin. I have my own troubles to worry about. Rand and Perrin would have to make do with Moraine to look after them. And Min will certainly look after Rand, she thought with a flash of jealousy that she tried to suppress. She almost succeeded. With a sigh, she took up the lead of the horse litter. Mat lay bundled to his chin. His breathing was a dry rasp. Soon, she thought. You'll be healed soon now, and we'll find out what's waiting for us. She wished Perrin would stop trying to frighten them. She wished she did not think Perrin had reason to frighten them. Perrin took them around the tower grounds to a small side gate that stood open with 2 guards. Pausing, the Aes Sedai pushed back her cowl and leaned from her saddle to speak softly to one of the men. He gave a start, and a surprised look at Egwene and the others. With a quick, "As you command, Aes Sedai," he took off into the grounds at a run. Perrin was already riding through the gates as he spoke. She rode as if there were no hurry. Egwene followed with the litter, exchanging glances with Nynaeve and Elaine, wondering what Perrin had told the man. A grey stone guardhouse stood just inside the gate, shaped like a 6-pointed star lying on its side. A small knot of guards lounged in the doorway. They left off talking and bowed as Perrin rode past. This part of the tower grounds could have been some lord's park, with trees and pruned shrubs and wide gravelled paths. Other buildings were visible through the trees, and the tower itself loomed over everything. The path led them to a stable yard among the trees, where grooms in leather vests came running to take their horses. At the Aes Sedai's direction, some of the grooms unfastened the litter and set it gently off to one side. As the horses were led away into the stable, Perrin took the leather sack from Mat's feet and tucked it carelessly under one arm. Nynaeve paused in knuckling her back and frowned at the Aes Sedai. "You said he has hours, perhaps. Are you just going to—" Perrin held up a hand, but whether it was the gesture that stopped Nynaeve or the crunch of feet approaching on gravel, Egwene could not say. In a moment, Sheriam Sedai appeared, followed by 3 of the accepted, their white dresses ringed at the hem with the colors of all 7 Ajahs from blue to red, and 2 husky men in rough laborers' coats. The mistress of novices was a slightly plump woman with the high cheekbones that were common in Chaldea. Flame-red hair and clear, tilted green eyes made her smooth, Aes Sedai features striking. She eyed Egwene and the others calmly, but her mouth was tight. "So you have brought back our 3 runaways, Perrin. With everything that happened, I could almost wish you had not." "We did not," Egwene began, but Perrin cut her off with a sharp, "Be silent!" Perrin stared at her, at each of the 3 of them, as if the intensity of her look could hold their mouths shut. Egwene was sure that, for her part, it could. She had never seen Perrin angry before. Nynaeve crossed her arms beneath her breasts and muttered under her breath, but she said nothing. The 3 accepted behind Sheriam kept their silence, of course, but Egwene thought she could see their ears grow from listening. When she was certain Egwene and the others would remain still, Perrin turned back to Sheriam. The boy must be taken somewhere away from everyone. He is ill, dangerously so, dangerous to others as well as to himself. "I was told you had a litter to be carried." Sheriam motioned the 2 men to the litter, spoke a quiet word to one, and as quickly as that, Mat was whisked away. Egwene opened her mouth to say he needed help now, but at Perrin's stare, quick and furious, she closed it again. Nynaeve was tugging her braid nearly hard enough to pull it out of her head. "I suppose," Perrin said, "that the whole tower knows we have returned by now?" "Those who do not know," Sheriam told her, "will know before much longer. Comings and goings have become the first topic of conversation and gossip, even before Falmer, and far ahead of the war in Caerhien. Did you think to keep it secret?" Perrin gathered the leather sack in both arms. "I must see the Amelin, immediately." "And what of these 3? Perrin considered Egwene and her friends, frowning. "They must be closely held until the Amelin wishes to see them. If she does wish to. Closely held, mind. Their own rooms will do, I think. No need for cells. Not a word to anyone." Perrin was still speaking to Sheriam, but Egwene knew the last had been meant as a reminder to her and the others. Nynaeve's brows were drawn down, and she jerked at her braid as if she wanted to hit something. Elaine's blue eyes were open wide, and her face was even paler than usual. Egwene was not sure which feelings she shared, anger or fear or worry. Some of all 3, she thought. With a last, searching glance at her 3 traveling companions, Perrin hurried off, clutching the sack to her chest, cloak flapping behind her. Sheriam put her fists on her hips and studied Egwene and the other 2. For a moment, Egwene felt a lessening of tension. The mistress of novices always kept a steady temper and a sympathetic sense of humor even when she was giving you extra chores for breaking the rules. But Sheriam's voice was grim when she spoke. "Not a word," Perrin Sedai said, "and not a word shall it be. If one of you speaks, except to answer an Aes Sedai, of course, I'll make you wish you had nothing but a switching and a few hours scrubbing floors to worry about. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Aes Sedai," Egwene said, and heard the other 2 say the same, although Nynaeve pronounced the words like a challenge. Sheriam made a disgusted sound in her throat, almost a growl. Fewer girls now come to the tower to be trained than once did, but they still come. Most leave never having learned to sense the true source, much less touch it. A few learn enough not to harm themselves before they go. A bare handful can aspire to be raised to the accepted, and fewer still to wear the shawl. It is a hard life, a hard discipline, yet every novice fights to hold on, to attain the ring and the shawl. Even when they are so afraid, they cry themselves to sleep every night. They struggle to hold on. And you 3, who have more ability born in you than I ever hoped to see in my lifetime, left the tower without permission, ran away not even half-trained, like irresponsible children, stayed away for months. And now you ride back in as if nothing has happened, as if you can take up your training again on the morrow." She let out a long breath as if she might explode otherwise. "Faulan!" The 3 accepted jumped as if they had been caught eavesdropping, and one, a dark, curly-haired woman, stepped forward. They were all young women, but still older than Nynaeve. Nynaeve's rapid acceptance had been extraordinary. In the normal course of things, it took years as a novice to earn the great serpent rings they wore, and would take years more before they could hope to be raised to full Aes Sedai. Take them to their rooms, Sheriam commanded, and keep them there. They may have bread, cold broth, and water until the Amelin seat says otherwise. And if one of them speaks even a word, you may take her to the kitchens and set her to scrubbing pots. She whirled and stalked away, even her back expressing anger. Faulan eyed Egwene and the others with almost a hopeful air, especially Nynaeve, who wore a glower like a mask. Faulan's round face held no love for those who broke the rules so extravagantly, and less for one like Nynaeve, a wilder who had earned her ring without ever being a novice, who had channeled power before she ever entered Tar Valon. When it became obvious that Nynaeve meant to keep her anger to herself, Faulan shrugged. When the Amelin sends for you, you'll probably be stilled. Give over, Faulan, another of the accepted said. The oldest of the three. She had a willowy neck and coppery skin, and a graceful way of moving. I will take you, she told Nynaeve. I am called Theodrim, and I, too, am a wilder. I will hold you to Sheriam Sedai's order, but I will not bait you. Come. Nynaeve gave Egwene and Elaine a worried look, then sighed and let Theodrin lead her away. Wilders, Faulan muttered. On her tongue, it sounded like a curse. She turned her stare to Egwene. The third accepted. A pretty, apple-cheeked young woman stationed herself beside Elaine. Her mouth was turned up at the corners as if she liked to smile, but the stern look she gave Elaine said she would brook no nonsense now. Egwene returned Faulan's stare with as much calm as she could manage and, she hoped, a measure of the haughty, silent contempt that Elaine had adopted. Red Ajah, she thought. This one will definitely choose the Reds. But it was hard not to think of her own troubles. Light. What are they going to do to us? She meant the Aes Sedai, the tower, not these women. Well, come along, Faulan snapped. It's bad enough. I have to stand guard on your door without standing here all day. Come along. Taking a deep breath, Egwene gripped Elaine's hand and followed. Light? Let them be, healing Mat. Chapter 12. The Amelin Seat. Sian Sanche paced the length of her study, pausing now and again to glance, with a blue-eyed gaze that had made rulers stammer, at a carved nightwood box on a long table centered in the room. She hoped she would not have to use any of the carefully drawn documents within it. They had been prepared and sealed in secret by her own hand to cover a dozen possible eventualities. She had laid a warding on the box so that if any hand but hers opened it, the contents would flash to ash in an instant. Very likely the box itself would burst into flame. And burn the thieving fisher bird, whoever she might be, so she never forgets it, I hope, she muttered. For the 100th time since being told that Perrin had returned, she readjusted her stole on her shoulders without realizing what she was doing. It hung below her waist, broad and striped with the colors of the 7 Ajahs. The Amelin seat was of all Ajahs, and of none, no matter from which she had been raised. The room was ornate, for it had belonged to generations of women who had worn the stole. The tall fireplace and broad, cold hearth were all carved golden marble from Kandor, and the diamond-shaped floor tiles, polished redstone from the mountains of mist. The walls were panels of some pale striped wood, hard as iron and carved in fantastic beasts and birds of unbelievable plumage. Panels brought from the lands beyond the Aiel Waste by the sea folk before Artur Hawkwing was born. Tall, arched windows, open now to let in the new, green smells, led onto a balcony overlooking her small private garden, where she seldom had time to walk. All that grandeur was in stark contrast to the furnishings Sian Sanche had brought to the room. The one table and the stout chair behind it were plain, if well polished with age and beeswax, as was the only other chair in the room. That stood off to one side, close enough to be drawn up if she wished a visitor to sit. A small Tyren rug lay in front of the table, woven in simple patterns of blue and brown and gold. A single drawing, tiny fishing boats among reeds, hung above the fireplace. 6 stands held open books about the floor. That was all. Even the lamps would not have been out of place in a farmer's house. Sian Sanche had been born poor in Tyr. and had worked on her father's fishing boat, one just like the boats in the drawing, in the delta called the Fingers of the Dragon, before ever she dreamed of coming to Tar Valon. Even the nearly 10 years since she had been raised to the seat had not made her comfortable with too much luxury. Her bedchamber was more simple still. 10 years with the stole, she thought. Nearly 20 since I decided to sail these dangerous waters, and if I slip now, I'll wish I were back hauling nets. She spun at a sound. Another Aes Sedai had slipped into the room, a copper-skinned woman with dark hair cut short. She caught herself in time to keep her voice steady and say only what was expected. "Yes, Lean." The Keeper of the Chronicles bowed, just as deeply as she would had others been present. The tall Aes Sedai, as tall as most men, was second only to the Amelin in the White Tower. And though Siuan had known her since they were novices together, sometimes Liane's insistence on upholding the dignity of the Amelin seat was enough to make Siuan want to scream. "Perrin is here, mother, asking leave to speak with you. I have told her you are busy, but she asks." "Not too busy to speak to her," Siuan said. Too quickly she knew, but she did not care. "Send her in. There's no need for you to remain, Liane. I will speak to her alone." A twitch of her eyebrows was the Keeper's only sign of surprise. The Amelin seldom saw anyone, even a queen, without the Keeper present. But the Amelin was the Amelin. Lean bowed her way out, and in moments Perrin took her place, kneeling to kiss the great serpent ring on Swan's finger. The brown sister had a good-sized leather sack under her arm. "Thank you for seeing me, mother," Perrin said as she straightened. "I have urgent news from Falmer, and more. I scarcely know where to begin." "Begin where you will," Siuan said. "These rooms are warded, in case anyone thinks to use childhood tricks of eavesdropping." Perrin's eyebrows lifted in surprise, and the Amelin added, "Much has changed since you left." "Speak." "Most importantly, then, Randall Thor has proclaimed himself the Dragon Reborn." Siuan felt a tightness loosen in her chest. "I hoped it was he," she said softly. "I've had reports from women who could only tell what they had heard, and rumors by the score come with every trader's boat and merchant's wagon, but I could not be sure." She took a deep breath. "Yet I think I can name the day it happened. Did you know the 2 false dragons no longer trouble the world?" "I had not heard, mother." "That is good news." "Yes. Mazarim time is in the hands of our sisters in Saldea, and the poor fellow in Hadon Merk, the light have pity on his soul, was taken by the Tyrens and executed on the spot. No one even seems to know what his name was. Both were taken on the same day and, according to rumor, under the same circumstances. They were in battle, and winning, when suddenly a great light flashed in the sky, and a vision appeared, just for an instant. There are a dozen different versions of what it was, but in both cases the result was exactly the same. The false dragon's horse reared up and threw him. He was knocked unconscious, and his followers cried out that he was dead, and fled the field, and he was taken. Some of my reports speak of visions in the sky at Forme. I'll wager a gold mark to a week-old delta perch that was the instant Randall Thor proclaimed himself. "The true dragon has been reborn," Perrin said almost to herself, "and so the pattern has no room for false dragons anymore. We have loosed the dragon reborn on the world." "Thy old! The light have mercy on us." The Amelin shook her head irritably. "We have done what must be done, and if even the newest novice learns of it, I will be stilled before the next sunrise if I'm not torn to pieces first. Me, and Moraine, and Perrin, and likely anyone thought to be a friend of ours as well. It was not easy to carry on so great a conspiracy when only 3 women knew of it, when even a close friend would betray them and consider it a duty well done. Light, but I wish I could be sure they would not be right to do it. At least he is safely in Moraine's hands. She will guide him and do what must be done. What else have you to tell me, daughter?" For answer, Perrin placed the leather sack on the table and took out a curled gold horn with silver script inlaid around its flaring bell mouth. She laid the horn on the table, then looked to the Amelin with quiet expectation. Siwan did not have to be close enough to read the script to know what it said. Tiami avon moridzin isain devadin. The grave is no bar to my call. The Horn of Valere, she gasped. You brought that all the way here, across hundreds of leagues, with the hunters looking everywhere for it. Light, woman, it was to be left with Rand Ulthor. I know, mother, Perrin said calmly. But the hunters all expect to find the horn in some great adventure, not in a sack with 4 women escorting a sick youth. And it would do Rand no good. What do you mean? He is to fight Tarmon Gaidon. The horn is to summon dead heroes from the grave to fight in the last battle. Has Moiraine once again made some new plan without consulting me? This is none of Moiraine's doing, mother. We plan, but the wheel weaves the pattern as it wills. Rand was not first to sound the horn. Mat Cauthon did that. And Mat now lies below, dying of his ties to the Shadar Logoth dagger. Unless he can be healed here... Siwan shivered. Shadar Logoth, that dead city so tainted that even Trollocs feared to enter, and with reason. By chance, a dagger from that place had come into young Mat's hands, twisting and tainting him with the evil that had killed the city long ago. Killing him. By chance? Or by the pattern? He is Ta'veren too, after all. But Mat sounded the horn. Then. So long as Mat lives, Perrin went on, the horn of Baler is no more than a horn to anyone else. If he dies, of course, another can sound it and forge a new link between man and horn. Her gaze was steady and untroubled by what she seemed to be suggesting. Many will die before we are done, daughter. And who else could I use to sound it again? I'll not take the risk of trying to return it to Moiraine now. One of the Gaidin, perhaps. The pattern has yet to make his fate clear. Yes, mother. And the horn? For the moment, the Amelin said finally, we will find some place to hide this where no one but we two know. I will consider what to do after that. Perrin nodded. As you say, mother. Of course, a few hours will make one decision for you. Is that all you have for me? Siwan snapped. If it is, I have those 3 runaways to deal with. There is the matter of the Shanshan, mother. What of them? All my reports say they have fled back across the ocean, or to wherever they came from. It seems so, mother. But I fear we may have to deal with them again. Perrin pulled a small leather notebook from behind her belt and began leafing through it. They spoke of themselves as the Forerunners, or those who come before, and talked of the return, and of reclaiming this land as theirs. I've taken notes on everything I heard of them, only from those who actually saw them, of course, or had dealings with them. Perrin, you are worrying about a lionfish out in the Sea of Storms, while here and now the silverpike are chewing our nets to shreds. The brown sister continued turning pages. An apt metaphor, mother, the lionfish. Once I saw a large shark that a lionfish had chased into the shallows, where it died. She tapped one page with a finger. Yes. This is the worst. Mother, the Shanshan use the one power in battle. They use it as a weapon. Siwan clasped her hands tightly at her waist. The reports the pigeons had brought spoke of that, too. Most had only second-hand knowledge, but a few women wrote of seeing for themselves. The power used as a weapon. Even dry ink on paper carried an edge of hysteria when they wrote of that. That is already causing us trouble, Perrin, and will cause more as the story spread and grow with the spreading. But I can do nothing about that. I am told these people are gone, daughter. Do you have any evidence otherwise? Well, no, mother, but until you do, let us deal with getting the silverpike out of our nets before they start chewing holes in the boat, too. With reluctance, Perrin closed the notebook and tucked it back behind her belt. As you say, mother. If I might ask, what do you intend to do to Nynaeve and the other 2 girls? The Amelin hesitated, considering. Before I am done with them, they will wish they could go down to the river and sell themselves for fish bait. It was the simple truth, but it could be taken in more than one way. Now, seat yourself. and tell me everything those three have said and done in the time they were with you. Everything. Chapter 13. Punishments. Lying on her narrow bed, Egwene frowned up at the flickering shadows cast on the ceiling by her single lamp. She wished she could form some plan of action, or reason out what to expect next. Nothing came. The shadows had more pattern than her thoughts. She could hardly even make herself worry about Mat. Yet the shame she felt at that was small, crushed by the walls around her. It was a stark, windowless room, like all those in the novices' quarters, small and square and painted white, with pegs on one wall for hanging her belongings, the bed built against a second, and a tiny shelf on a third, where in other days she had kept a few books borrowed from the tower library. A washstand and a three-legged stool completed the furnishings. The floorboards were almost white from scrubbing. She had done that task, on hands and knees, every day she had lived there, in addition to her other chores and lessons. Novices lived simply, whether they were innkeepers' daughters or the daughter, heir of Andor. She wore the plain white dress of a novice again. Even her belt and pouch were white. But she felt no joy at having rid herself of the hated grey. Her room had become too much of a prison cell. What if they mean to keep me here, in this room? In this room, like a cell, like a collar, and fun. She glanced at the door. The dark. Accepted would still be standing guard on the other side, she knew, and rolled close to the white plastered wall. Just above the mattress was a small hole, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, drilled through into the next room by novices long ago. Egwene kept her voice to a whisper. "Elaine?" There was no answer. "Elaine, are you asleep?" "How could I sleep?" came Elaine's reply, a reedy whisper through the hole. "I thought we might be in some trouble, but I did not expect this. Egwene, what are they going to do to us?" Egwene had no answer, and her guesses were not of the sort she wanted to voice aloud. She did not even want to think of them. "I actually thought we might be heroes, Elaine. We brought back the Horn of Valere safely. We discovered Liandrin is Black Ajah." Her voice skipped on that. Aes Sedai had always denied the existence of a Black Ajah, an Ajah that served the Dark One, and were known to become angry with anyone who even suggested it was real. But we know it's real. We should be heroes, Elaine. "Should and would build no bridges," Elaine said. "Light. I used to hate it when Mother said that to me, but it's true." Vervin said we mustn't speak of the Horn, or Liandrin, to anyone but her or the Amelin seat. I do not think any of this will work out the way we thought. It is not fair. We've been through so much. You've been through so much. "It just is not fair," Vervin says. Moraine says. "I know why people think Aes Sedai are puppet masters. I can almost feel the strings on my arms and legs. Whatever they do, it will be what they decide is good for the White Tower, not what is good or fair for us." "But you still want to be Aes Sedai, don't you?" Egwene hesitated, but there was never any real question as to her answer. "Yes," she said, "I still do. It is the only way we will ever be safe. I lay. But I will tell you this. I'll not let myself be stilled." That was a new thought, voiced as soon as it came to her, but she realized she did not want to take it back. Give up touching the true source. She could sense it there, even now, the glow just over her shoulder, the shining just out of sight. She resisted the desire to reach out to it. Give up being filled with the one power, feeling more alive than I ever have before. On won't? Not without a fight. There was a long silence from the other side of the wall. How could you stop it? You may be as strong as any of them now, but neither one of us knows enough yet to stop even one Aes Sedai from shielding us from the source, and there are dozens of them here. Egwene considered. Finally she said, "I could run away. Really run away this time." "They would come after us, Egwene. I'm sure they would. Once you show